And then I know she said, let's hold off on the applause, but let's have some confidence and give Ava a round of applause. All right, over to Ava.
Okay, now I'm conceited. I got my applause. I can go. As Jeff said, at my age, there is no question that's indiscreet, okay, anymore. I couldn't care less what people think about me, all right? That is the compensation, maybe the best compensation of old age. And as I am just about 88, that's considered way beyond the rubrics you have in questionnaires 70 and beyond. I'm way beyond. So please be free to ask. I move around because in spite of hearing aids I have, I do not hear properly anymore, except music. But the human voice, the frequency of the human voice is that in between, which is lost. Whatever you read, whatever was given to you is part of my makeup, who I became due to the Second World War experiences, the experiences of the pre-war, and whatever happened. So please be free to investigate. That's what you are preparing for. And I wish you all the best. It's the most interesting thing you could have chosen. So you made a good choice. All right?
What do you have for questions, folks?
I'm waiting, yes.
So what is it like for you years later after the Holocaust to tell your story?
It is not that I ever stopped, because I am a painter, and as such I was drawing the experiences, and I didn't start at a particular age. It was just a continuum of life, of impressions, of what I could say without leaving a trace to reveal who I was, because I was in hiding. And if I would have written anything, it might have put into jeopardy the people who gave me shelter. So the story is an ongoing story. My children grew up with it. My friends, whoever decided and could stand me. My two husbands, all right. I'm a very fortunate woman who had two good men in one lifetime. Okay, that's a nutshell. Any other questions?
During your time of World War II, did you have any role models that helped you along the way? Did you have anyone you looked up to?
No.
No.
I was completely cut off. My roots, the surrounding I was used to. I exchanged well-to-do, middle class good education. I was the third generation of good education. I was at the beginning, but even my grandparents were educated people. So it was a good start. I had a good base, and that really held me on the level of not really succumbing or sinking into the morass that was around.
So you would say your grandparents are the only role models you really had?
They were the beginnings, the grandparents, my parents who were survivors of World War I, that was that generation. From the swinging 20s, okay? So I had that as well a little bit, the flair of the Art Deco. But during the war, the 4 years, I was in complete isolation, and the post-war 4 years, almost 5 years, was a semi-hiding during the communist era. I wasn't hunted being the other, the different, the Jew, but I definitely would have been probably killed if they could have known what was in my mind. Yes, I'll come back.
Hi.
Yes.
I was wondering, you were saying about the complete isolation that you were feeling, or that you went through for 4 years, you said. How did that impact you socially after all these years? Did you have to relearn socialization and all those things like that? Can you explain that?
I had to relearn to talk
Yeah.
to people because I was advised, and it was very good advice of my shelter, the people who sheltered me, not to talk, because they said I would have given myself away immediately because my language was different. I even changed my body language from a city kid with languages and music and theater into an illiterate farmhand who was deaf-mute outside the farm, in order not to give myself away, not to look at people in the eye when I met somebody. I was going like this, with the kerchief. I was afraid to get raped. I was 15 and 16 and 17 and 18. Okay? So I was hiding not only who I was hiding my gender. Excuse me.
What inspired you to write?
First, I painted out what I wanted to say, which is a documentation. As the time went by, I realized I should put it into words, because my paintings are, in a way, a little abstract, and words are much more explicit. And due to the many questions my grandchildren started to ask me, I decided to write. I didn't write in the interim period while I was in Israel, because I had to make a living, and it was again a new language. I grew up with 3 languages, and then I changed my entire inner constellation into a new language. And then my first husband, the father of my children, died, and I started to travel with my work, and that brought me to the United States, which was again a new language. And as I started to make a living here, I decided to write in English, which was in a way easier to me, because my first language was German, which is a Germanic language, and I had French and Latin in school. So English somehow was very easy to write, and I also made it, I thought it was important to trigger the curiosity of my grandchildren. If they really want to read my story, they have to learn English properly. I am still learning English properly.
Are you doing a good job?
Yeah, fair. I'm still going to the many dictionaries.
While hiding in the farm, did you have an everyday routine, or how did you get by?
When?
While hiding in the farm for 4 years, not talking.
Oh, sure.
What did you have a routine every day? Like, what did you do?
Oh, sure. I was responsible for the livestock, the chicken, the small vegetable garden, the daily bringing of water from the source, which was walking and logging big cans of water. So the profit, my war profit, I am a war profiteer, is that I still can walk at my age and still can do my housework, okay? So I gained through that exercise early on, and through my entire life, I continued.
How did music play a big part in your life?
I'm sorry?
How did music play a part in your life?
Because I grew up with it. My father was a good musician, not professional, but a good amateur, which is very important. It comes from love to music. from France. And we had, you are gonna laugh, we were between the very first people in town who had a radio. Okay, I am talking prehistory for you. Bronze Age.
Was it a culture shock when you moved here to Chicago?
No.
No?
No, it wasn't because I read a lot of American literature translated into German, even before the war. So during, I knew Mark Twain and Fenimore Cooper, who nobody knows anymore. I knew all the Wild West stories, history. I was curious. I'm still curious. I'm curious about your questions, really, because that keeps me in reality of today.
What do you think about today's times, like today's generation?
I don't have any grievances. I'm a person who likes real life, real people. That's why I am accepting what is reality in a changing world. I do not always understand, but accept, because it's a change, and change is what nature is. Change and recycling of everything on our planet. We are a very close entity. Hopefully, remaining to be self-reliant.
I wanted to read a quote from you.
Yes.
This is one of the stories, and then I had a question.
Okay.
You said that I would have loved to have possessed the firm Buddhist faith and conviction to trust messages from the mountaintops that would be carried by the winds for my sister. I still would. Why the Buddhist faith?
Because it is a very deep emotional need that gets verbalized in that thought. And we have thought about facts, and needs are the first and only thing we are born with. We are not born with any other intellectual capacity. What we know is what we are taught all our lives. We are born with need to survive. That's a need which is somewhere else in the brain. And the first sense we as humans have is fear, which develops about 8 months. And then everything else we are taught. And what we are taught is what we know until we decide to learn what we still want to improve of. Which is just about our entire life, if we are fortunate.
After losing so many people you've loved, how did that motivate you not to lose yourself?
I'm sorry.
After losing so many people that you loved, how did that motivate you to not lose yourself?
Lose myself? What is that?
As in, like, not, how did I say it?
Like, how did you stay strong after you lost your father and your sister? What,
And even your friends as well.
like, how did you stay strong during that time?
Surviving in a wartime. It's very difficult. You know, Martin Buber, a philosopher, said, it's a quotation that made him, for me, present in my mind. The most difficult, this is Martin Buber's quotation, the most difficult thing to imagine is reality. Okay? The first moment you think, come on, we all know what's reality. No, we do not. What is reality in the philosophical mind, or if we go into that? To imagine someone else's reality is sort of impossible. We can imagine, we all have imagination. We can think, what is stress? What is chaos? What is living in chaos? When we find ourselves in that chaos. War is chaos. There are no rules in war. This is why so many people who are coming out of wars have PTSD. All right? In my generation, who came out, my generation and older and younger, who came out of World War II, which was from 4 to 5 years in Europe in some places. Those people didn't know anything else except chaos. I, at 15, had a structure. At 15, we already have our infrastructure that doesn't change very much. We are adding or throwing, subtracting things from that base, but we do have a base that did not exist the moment I closed the door of the apartment and went out into hiding. That base was shattered, was gone. So, readjusting within 3 or 4 hours walk from one life into another is the time to change and start to structure a new reality. So at 15, that if I go back, that is a vacuum, that is walking to an emotional vacuum. Because I knew I had to cut everything out of my mind. I started to analyze that during the war, at short periods, I had the luxury to think how I feel. So, to explain it in a couple of sentences is a big task. I am still building that vacuum, filling that vacuum. In my writing, I just submitted my second book, and I'm already working on another one. So this is a lifelong quest. How do we fill our internal empty space? Emotional empty space. After World War II, there were very select individuals, I mean select, very small, who had some kind of a contact with psychology. I had books. I was reading whatever I could find and find time to read, because I had finished school, make a living, take care of an invalid mother, and read. That was my post-war active life. So all that is part of putting chaos back into order, some order. You asked about discipline. I even don't think about discipline.
What was your escape? What was your escape during your teenage years? What was the getaway?
The getaway was the walk through the woods, the very short span when I just put the cans down and just stretched out on the ground and looked up into the trees.
Did you ever think that you would be right here? When you were
Never I even didn't dream about that. It was the reality, the immediate reality. I didn't make plans. There was no space to daydream. If that were very short moments. And the daydream was usually, would be nice to have a good meal. Okay? I was hungry. I was really hungry all the time, with very scarce food. Okay? Yes.
was wondering about, and maybe you already answered this in my head, but knowing, I feel like I already know.
No embarrassing question, my dear.
I wanted to know how you dealt with fear, and if that even came to your head, if you didn't even have time for that. But maybe a vivid memory of being very fearful, or one of the most vivid memories.
My biggest fear was to be buried alive in a bombed
The case.
house.
House.
And April 6, 1941, the Nazi bombers just filled the sky, and I remember we were living on the 4th floor in a high-rise, 4 floors.
Yeah.
There was a basement, of course, but I heard, I used to have a good ear, and I heard the bomber, it was like a very low bass sound, and I got up onto the balcony, and it was a blue sky morning, Sunday, and like a dark cloud slowly coming up. And of course, we dressed fast, went down, and I couldn't go into the basement. And I told my father, I'm sorry, I'll stay outside. And he is a soldier, he was a soldier in World War I. He said, look, even the blast can injure you. And I said, I don't mind to die immediately. I don't want to be buried alive. And it took me many decades to realize where that fear started. And that fear started when I was 5 years old. That's the story, the first story in the second book. A cousin of my father, whom we loved very much, my sister and I, a young architect, died when he fell in the shaft where they had planned to have an elevator. Okay, the elevator shaft wasn't closed. Okay, it's a story. But then I realized where that fear developed. So like everything else in our mind, where, by the way, everything is recorded. That's our hard drive. Everything that ever happens is recorded. The question is, how do we retrieve that recorded event? But it clicked somehow. Neurons, protons, whatever.
Whatever.
Pixels.
I also had another question for you. As far as deciding, I understand that your father decided for everyone to split up to that
He suggested it,
Suggested
and I immediately agreed.
Yeah. Did everyone else in the family agree? Or
My mother and sister stayed together, and that's a different story.
yeah, was it a hard decision, or do you know how he came to that suggestion, or?
I don't know. It was logic because we knew what was happening, what the Nazi doctrine was about. I was reading the newspaper, we had the radio with the news, we had people who were coming as refugees from Poland, from Czechia, from Austria. There were indications. I knew if the Germans entered. I was in Serbia. We knew the Croatians, if you know the map. It's Croatia, it's Slovenia, Croatia, Serbia, and then Montenegro and Albania and Greece in the south of the Balkan Peninsula. So the Slovenians let the Nazis through, the Croatians let the army through, some even with flowers, okay? Politics. So what else is new, all right? Yugoslavia was one big dysfunctional entity, as all the man-made countries usually are. Okay? So I knew what was ahead, and I knew I had to run. Yeah.
How about folks who haven't asked a question yet? Please feel free to join the conversation. There's been some folks have asked a bunch of questions, and that's wonderful, but please, other folks, join in the conversation.
I had a question. What did you look forward to the most when you got out of hiding?
I'm sorry.
What did you look forward to the most when you got out of hiding?
What did I
Look forward to the most?
for? To find who is alive. That was what made me really leave the farm and go into the city while there was still they were still fighting, you know. War doesn't stop at a particular time. There are people who are in hiding and fight. There were inner fightings in the occupied places. So occupation doesn't really make peace for people around. It's always easy to start violence. It's very difficult to bring it back into more or less normal circumstances.
You said that like when you got out of hiding, you had to relearn how to like socialize and stuff. But when you were going into hiding, how did you like train yourself not to like hear, like talk? Like how did you?
I don't remember how I did it. I know it was a very lengthy process because I remember feeling comfort in being isolated. This is how I can, after so many decades, come to a conclusion how that process evolved. It wasn't a fast process. I know that. And even today, I live alone, and that's my choice. I had to fight with my kids who wanted me to come here, or come there, wherever they live. And I don't want. I love them dearly, but I feel comfortable being on my own. I didn't make any connection with the man. I had opportunities when my second husband died because he was much older than I. And I just feel comfort in isolation. So that is also something that still, like a tentacle, holds me. That comfort of being invisible, whereas I'm a very easy person to open up to complete strangers, okay? So it's a controversy. We do have controversies within our psyche.
What's the name of your new book and when does it come out?
I won't give you the title yet, but I already submitted it to Northwestern, to the Northwestern University Press, because this is where I have most of my classes now.
And Ava's first book, The Soundless Roar, was also published by Northwestern Press, so she has a relationship with the press.
Thank you.
What is your attitude toward people that deny that the Holocaust happened?
First of all, that's their problem. To deny something that is so evident, so documented, is something that, people believe in UFOs, okay? It's not based on any proof of anything, because it was such a shock to realize what has happened. In the cradle of not civilization, but the late achievement in humanity, in the arts, in technology, in science, in medicine, and then came the twist. To twist all that wealth, accumulated wealth that started in the Renaissance. Okay, I want to go further back where it started and when, but from the Renaissance on, the Reformation, that started in Central Europe, okay? And that same cradle brought out the distortion of everything achieved prior to that. This, I only can say distortion of everything. Because it didn't start with killing the Jews. It started with killing the infants who were born with some disabilities. And then the perfection. There is no perfection in nature. Nature thrives on imperfections. Otherwise, it becomes a uniform. If we stop thinking about the pro and the contra in everything, we are the robot. We don't use the robot, we become it. So that's that. Going back to the denier. It's going against what nature did for a couple of years, all right. It's the differences, the changes, the adjusting to changes. The coping with what we don't know, what can we do about it? Can we acquire more knowledge, understanding, or just plain good old acceptance? Reality. I'm going back to Martin Buber. Yes?
In 1949, you moved to Israel.
Yes.
And that was just a year after the Arab-Israeli war?
Yeah, because I started my process in '48, but I couldn't make it.
I just want to read another quote to you, and this is just like a highly politicized quote. It says, Palestinian Arabs are experiencing a modern-day Holocaust due to the Israeli Jewish occupation there. How do you feel about that?
The Holocaust, quote unquote, in that were two small villages, Sabra and Shatila. Okay? I know history. The Holocaust the Nazis made were 1.5 million children annihilated in the 6 million Jews. I don't know the number of all the other. There were non-Jews. They tried to kill all the gypsies, okay, the Roma. Anybody who didn't fit into someone's distorted mind was free game. Homosexuals, the other, okay? So the moment that quote didn't really fit, that quote fits into war. War is casualties. called casualties. Those are people, human beings being killed. And it's not somebody who is intoxicated and goes out and just kills. It's war. And on the other hand, when I arrived, it was already after all the Arabs withdrew. And there were Israelis, including David Ben-Gurion, who said, what is the world going to say that we as Jews cannot live together with the Arabs? Okay? That is the beginning that is still festering like a fuzzy wound in the area. That the Mufti said, leave everything, we'll come back and kill all the Jews who are there and take their property or whatever. And people just left as refugees, which is a tragedy. For me, being a refugee, I know what that is, and it is tragic, but that's politics. Okay? To compare Sabra and Shatila to the Europe, if you have ever seen the movies that were filmed by the German army in the camps, those were not only Jews in those camps, just mostly. At the end of the war, the German army left their own troops in Hungary, in Belarus, in the Ukraine. They left them because they wanted to take the remnants of the Jews from Hungary to Auschwitz. This is documentation in the British War archives. Okay? That's what you can by now see because they opened the archives. So archives are terrific. They are not political, they are not personal, they are not emotional. Those are facts.
Maybe one or two more questions for Ava before we start to wrap up. Tracy, and then maybe one other. Go ahead, Tracy.
You and your mom like reunited.
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. You and your mom, you guys like reunited. How was that when you finally like got to see her again for the first time?
I was happy that I found her. It took me a couple of days to find her.
Got another one, Emma?
Just a follow-up to that.
Anybody else?
Mike? Okay, Emily, do you have
Okay.
something, Mike, or no? No?
When did you know where she was? Like, how did you find her?
I was searching for her.
And you said a couple of days?
Yeah, I was asking around.
Yeah. It was in a community, the same area of the...
Area.
You're good then.
Okay. Any other questions for Ava? Folks who haven't asked? Folks who have asked?
Thank you for you had the question.
Go ahead, Alyssa. We'll make this the last one.
Okay. I was just gonna ask, what was it like seeing the refugees and soldiers at the Jewish Community Center?
You'll have to read my second book. All right.
Well, sounds like a wonderful way to end, promoting the second book. Now, okay, now Ava was skeptical before she started if she deserved the applause. Can we give Ava? Yeah, all right, thank you.
You still make my hard drive run.
Now, I have to tell you that Ava lives near here in Lakeshore Drive, and so a real privilege of being here. My wife met Ava through working for Facing History and ourselves, and so we really feel fortunate to consider Ava part of our family. She comes to family events and Passover and birthdays and that kind of thing. And it's just a wonderful opportunity to learn from someone different ways over different times. And so fortunately, I'm able to learn that from Ava and from my wife. All right, so we can give them both a round of applause. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And do you have a couple minutes? Is it okay if they
I have.
Okay, yeah. So why don't we just take a couple minutes if you want to come, say hi to Ava. Just meet her for a minute, then we'll come back as a group to wrap up for the day. Okay, but yeah, take a minute or so if you want to come and say hi.
Can I take a picture of you?
Yeah, please. Oh yeah, please.
Take a picture.
Sure.